Hi, my name is Dr. Jeffrey Weiss. This is episode 7 of Medicine Confidential. The topic today is medical heroes. This is actually a book that I wrote that's on Amazon. It's very inexpensive, that talks about these people. But before I start, I'd like to just mention that the last episode I spoke about a scandal that took place regarding the microscopes at a large hospital system. I had written a book about that called The District, and this is also on Amazon. Um, it's a novel. I think you'll enjoy it. By the way, the comment was made whether I'm AI. I assure you I'm not. If I was, I would have added more hair. So let's get started. I'm only going to speak about those heroes in the 20th century. Obviously, this has been going on for hundreds of years. The first one is Harold Ridley. Each year, more than 20 million people undergo cataract surgery, and the standard of care is you put in an intraocular lens. Well, this was invented by Dr. Harold Ridley. He saw during World War II that Spitfire pilots that had pieces of the canopy that was made out of polymethyl methacrylate plastic that was in their eyes, that it didn't cause inflammation. So he got the idea of making a lens and placing it in somebody's eyes. Up to this point, people would get these very thick Coke bottle glasses that were very difficult to get used to, that were very heavy and very unpleasant to wear. The teaching at the time was you never put anything foreign in an eye. And there was a very famous British ophthalmologist, and Dr. Ridley was also British. Um, his name was Sir Stuart Duke Elder, and he lambasted Dr. Ridley. And Dr. Ridley was laughed at in medical meetings and criticized and embarrassed. And he had, Ridley said that if he had known what was going to happen, he never would have invented it. And it was terrible. But other ophthalmologists saw the value of this, and companies were formed, and standard of care is that everybody, when they have the cataract removed, gets a lens put in, and this is all due to Dr. Ridley. He was knighted by the Queen of England at age 92 and passed away at age 93. The next person I'd like to speak about is Jonas Salk regarding polio. And this is in the book. There was a huge battle. I mean, it was ridiculous just trying to get the polio vaccine out to the public. There was another Dr. Sabin. There was a huge battle. And something so obvious was a huge fight. And we really got lucky because Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had polio, asked his friend, Mr. O'Connor, to work on this, and he funded both the Salk and Sabin vaccine. And the Salk vaccine was probably better, but Sabin attacked Salk, and the AMA and the U.S. Public Health Service replaced the Salk vaccine with Sabin's. So Orthodox medicine had their revenge, but then the number of polio cases increased. O'Connor wanted his organization to pay for free public vaccination, but the AMA resisted. They wanted it to be given in a doctor's office for a fee, and they won. Arnold Past was another ophthalmologist. Uh, Premature babies had an epidemic of blindness in the 1940s and 1950s. And it was Dr. Patz who said giving the oxygen actually led, giving 100% oxygen actually led to the blindness. Well, this was against prevailing opinion. They were premature and they needed oxygen. But he said that the oxygen, 100% oxygen, was the one doing it. National Institutes of Health refuse funding for ethical reasons. I get such a kick when people say, oh, we can't do it for ethical reasons or HIPAA protection or nonsense, just to hide behind something. But he was proven correct. Robert Atkins, you may have heard about him. He was a cardiologist who promoted carbohydrate restriction and high protein, high fat diet to lose weight. Everybody fought against him. NIH did a huge study to prove him wrong, but they couldn't because he was right. You're getting the intent of this podcast. Charles Kelman, another ophthalmologist, he got the idea of removing cataracts using ultrasound when he saw his dentist using an ultrasound machine. They made this, and instead of having big incisions in the eye with lots of sutures, he can make a small hole. Well, organized medicine didn't like that. The American Academy of Ophthalmology tried to kick him out and brought him up on charges, and he was vilified and investigated. But some other honest ophthalmologist defended him, and there was a great rift in the ophthalmic community. But finally, he was proved correct. I allude to a prior podcast where the powers that be tend to be older and set in their ways, and if they don't know about it or they didn't invent it, it can't be right. And there's also a little worry that they can't do the procedure, and then what kind of professor would they be? So this was now the standard of care throughout the world to use ultrasound to take out cataracts. And interestingly, the American Academy of Ophthalmology book, The History of Ophthalmology, only devotes one paragraph to this important invention because those people that can write history can write whatever history they want and they can sanitize past actions. Judah Folkman talked about angiogenesis. He hypothesized that tumors could secrete an unknown factor to increase their own blood supply. And he was attacked, but again, he was found to be right. Andreas Grunzig developed angioplasty. He was German and did not receive his academic promotion in Germany because they didn't think much of his ideas, but he performed the coronary angioplasty. And it worked. The bypass surgeons wouldn't accept the treatment because they were making their money doing surgery. And he was concerned that if there was poor patient selection, poor physician skill, there'd be bad outcomes, and then he'd be attacked. And physicians needed training. But despite that, he developed balloon angioplasty, and it's standard of care. Stanley Prusiner described prions. This is a protein. The word prion is the word comes from protein, and it wasn't a virus. He found this with a fatal condition called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's a slow virus. but it wasn't a virus. His NIH application was turned down. His funding from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute was terminated. UCSF denied him tenure, but his friends and colleagues supported him. He got funding, interestingly, from the R.J. Reynolds Company and Sherman Fairchild Foundation, and then the NIH. Virologists were against him, but he was right. And I'd like to read to you something that he said. While it is quite reasonable for scientists to be skeptical of new ideas that do not fit within the accepted realm of scientific knowledge, the best science often emerges from situations where results carefully obtained do not fit within the accepted paradigms. At times, the press became involved since the media provide the naysayers with a means to vent their frustration not being able to find the cherished nucleic acid that they were so sure must exist. Since the press was usually unable to understand the scientific arguments and usually keen to write about any controversy, the personal attacks of the naysayers at times became very vicious. In 1997, he received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Alfred Sommer, vitamin A deficiency. He worked in Indonesia, discovered that vitamin A deficiency reduced immune responsiveness, leading to increased mortality and blindness. They refused to accept his findings. But finally, they did. Other people did. And that's also standard of care. James Allison, immunotherapy for cancer. His work was on activating the immune response to cancer treatment. Is revolutionary. Colleagues and companies discouraged him. In 2018, he received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Barry Marshall, ulcer disease. He discovered that a bacteria, Heliobacter pylori, produced ulcer disease. Everybody said he was nuts. And he was continuously attacked. His work was continuously rejected. To prove his point, he drank a dose of H. pylori himself. A few days later, he became sick and underwent endoscopy and confirmed that he had an ulcer. He treated himself with antibiotics and was cured, but nobody cared. A couple of years later, a tabloid newspaper called The Star published an article, Guinea Pig Doctor Discovers New Cure for Ulcers and the Cause. The headline interested scientists, patients, and funding sources. More than 10 years after the rejection of his first abstract, NIH released a statement agreeing with him. In 2005, he and his associate, Dr. Warren, received the Nobel Prize. Bennett Amalu, traumatic brain injuries. You may recall the movie with Will Smith, where he portrays the doctor. He published Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy in a National Football League player in the journal Neurosurgery. And boy, was he attacked. He presented to the NFL and they were ignored. 7 years after its discovery, the NFL finally acknowledged the link between long-term neurologic effects and concussions sustained in football. Terrible. Last one is Li Wenling, He was an ophthalmologist who reported the very beginnings of COVID-19, and he was attacked. China Central Television reported his punishment for rumor mongering, and he died of COVID. A group of Chinese academics published an open letter to the government calling for free speech and an apology for Li's death. More than 870,000 comments have been made under Li's last post on his social website since he died. Chinese government bestowed upon Li the highest honor of martyr. So I'd like to finish with a poem written by our president, Teddy Roosevelt. It's called The Man in the Arena. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. Credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you.